Hey, welcome back. Today we have another fun video for you here. I'm going through my collection. In this case, it's my brown knives collection. You may have caught it. I think back in April or May, I did a overview of brown knives. I did like the brown knives overview or almanac video. Sometimes I do these research videos. This one's just an update video on my collection. So I'm not going to go through like all of the history like I did on that one, but feel free to check it out. Maybe I'll link it in the description or something like that. This one's all about here's my current state of my brown knives collection. It's come a long way. Probably has more total knives and definitely more total dollars than when I did that last video. And this one's just going to go through what I have. I've made sure to keep one of each model, and then I have multiples of models that I really love. That said, there are a few here that I meant to sell along the way that I've just not got around to selling. So as I go through these, maybe I'll call out some of those that I might be willing to part with, and you can feel free to let me know if you might be interested. So let's start over here. I always like starting with the oldest ones first and kind of going through the heritage. This one right here is Brown Knives Parabolic number 12. It's the only parabolic I've been able to find that someone was willing to even part with. In fact, I think it may be the only one I've found that someone even had. I know one other guy that has one that got his right around the same time that I got this one. And I can't remember if he helped me find this or not, but got this from another collector. This one has copper inlays. This one was owned by Epic Snuggle Bunny, if you follow his channel. Big time collector. He's backed off a little bit on his videos, but this is a pretty cool one. It's got a mirror edge. I think it went back to Craig or maybe to another third party to be sharpened at some point. I think it may be the only hand-rubbed blade that Craig has ever done. He had a pretty funny comment after that one that he was never going to do it again. And then I only have one of the brown knives servos. So this one is number 168. These were done in M390 at the time, which Craig hasn't really done many other knives. I just happen to really like this particular one. There's nothing crazy about it. It's not some wild, Damascus or whatever, although it does have it on the pocket clip here. I just love the milling on it. I think the milling on this one's really neat. I've seen some others and they're a little cartoony. This one I just find very cool looking, and yeah, it's a nice knife. It's not my favorite knife ever, a little subject to lock bar pressure, but overall just a nice example of, oh sorry, I clicked in the wrong area, or touched in the wrong area, so zooming weird or focusing weird, but a nice example of what he does, and just super drop shot, which is pretty cool. So that's the one I've kept around. I'd be open to swapping that out for maybe a different model or something like that at some point. Sorry, let me see if I can get this to refocus here. All right, which brings me to another model that I only have one of. This one is quite a wild one. Here you can see it's a full mirror polish on the brown knives. And I hope my focus gets fixed. I don't know what's going on with it here, but it's gotten thrown off at some point here. Mirror polished version of the brown knives Exponent. This was a smaller model that he made. Also drop shot despite being super small, which is I find to be rare and pretty cool. And I don't have a lot of mirror polished blades, so I thought this was a really cool example where it has the neat Damascus show scale. It actually has an original clip, and then this was a clip I think Craig made for it, but I have both the original clip that's shown in the original picture. This is Exponent number 6, by the way. That's Parabolic 12, Servo 168, Exponent number 6. So one of his very early variants there. Not really sure what's going on here with the zoom. Maybe if I, or the focus, maybe if I zoom in, I can fix it here. I think we finally got it, sorry. This one right here is Prototype. Let me just get this wiped off. Just noticed it had a little bit of oil on it. Prototype number 3 of the Brown Knives LHC. I've noticed this one's very susceptible to lock bar pressure, which some of the later ones aren't quite as susceptible to, but this one will really lock up on you if you don't get off of the lock bar and kind of do it in the right way. These early ones had like this fuller, but you can like barely get to it, so you can't really use it, which is kind of funny. And you can't really use this one even though there's a little relief for it. So it's just kind of a funny model, the LHC V1, where you had the fuller as an option, but you couldn't really use it. Again, prototype number 3, kind of just a nice little textured tie version. I think this was actually when he kind of got into making knives that the average person would really like. The first three were a little quirky. These start getting really cool. And then somehow along the way, I actually got LHC #1. So that's prototype #3. This is regular, production model #1. So pretty neat variant here, and a little less susceptible in the lock bar pressure and a little better action. Like already he had figured out some things, it seems like, by variant #1 from prototype #3, which is pretty cool to see. Or at least that's how it seems. Maybe they were tuned after, being purchased or whatever. You never really know once they've exchanged some hands. But LHC #001, and then here you have LHC-X V2, so you can see the bolster lock and everything, which gets you pretty much out of any susceptibility unless you were to do something weird. You have to really try here to get on that lock for a flipper style knife. That's pretty much not going to be a problem. But really nice version #2 of the LHC-X. Number 264, awesome action, and it has like a Damascus steel blade with a nice polish on it. Carbon fiber on the scales, and then the titanium textured bolster. Just a beauty, honestly. I think that's when I first got my first LHC, it was basically the same model, but an even fancier version that my friend has right now with zirconium handles on it. But it's a cool model, and it really showed you, I think V2 here, that this was going to be a knife maker that a lot of people were going to like. This is Cortex prototype #1. There were definitely some differences, although this one is great, between this prototype #1 and some of the ones that came later. Prototype #1 has like a different jimping and a much taller flipper tab up here. It has this sort of top flipper model, and it's like quite a bit harder to thumb flick. I don't know what causes that exactly. Maybe I need to stay off of the lock bar there, but it really kind of catches up. So early prototype, it's a micarta scale in this case with titanium milled bolsters here. Not sure if that's just something on there. And then just a basic pocket clip. I noticed along the way he would actually mismatch pocket clip texturing. He does do that today still if you're interested. So on some of these custom ones, people actually had mismatch texturing with the pocket clips, which brings me to Cortex V2. You can see because the pivot has a collar on it. So he introduced the pivot collar on V2. Example number 313, and this is the one that people go most gaga about in the collection. It is a frame lock version instead of a bolster lock version. Beautiful blade on it with kind of like a semi-polish CPM 154. The action's phenomenal. It sounds great. It just looks good. Super straightforward. It kind of goes with all these newer versions that he makes now in the FSD. You could see this is where I think he kind of hit his stride on his milling pattern style. So kind of a pivotal model to me on that Cortex V2 number 313. This is Cortex V2 number 396, and it's the best action of any of the Cortexes that I've ever handled. I've probably had, I don't know, maybe like 5 others aside from the ones that show here. And this one just stands out where everything works perfectly. Thumb flick works perfectly. The action is immaculate. The flipper tab, just everything seems to work right. You can roll it out, which I struggle to do with some of the others. It is just phenomenal. This one has a matching pattern Damascus clip, Damascus scales with textured titanium bolsters, and then I think it's DLC, if I recall correctly, coating on the pivot collar. No, maybe it's Zirc on the pivot collar, and then DLC on the hardware. And then you have like a high anodized backspacer. So that's actually not a Damascus backspacer on this one, which is kind of interesting. You would have thought they would have gone Damascus on it, but it's a kind of cool contrasty backspacer on it. So that's a really neat one. It's not cheap to keep that one in the collection, but one that I've really struggled to imagine parting with because it is so nice. The next one took me months to find. I was really on a search for this one or one like it. and I found this one, which was my first choice. This one is Brown Knives FSD prototype number 3. The reason prototype number 3 is interesting is because the first two, prototype number 1 and 2, are actually in this pattern 2. So this is pattern 1 is what he ended up doing after the prototypes. He called this pattern 1. And this is the first one done in pattern 1, which I think is the most preferred, pretty universally preferred pattern on the FSD. The FSD is a beast. It's a really big knife. You may not be able to tell here on video, but for any of you that know the mini FSD, you know, you put them next to each other, and this is already a full-size knife that you can see I've got space here on the end of my hand. This thing is a really big knife. It's like the size of a Demco 8020 or, you know, another full-size knife. Like it's bigger than a Hinderer XM18 3.5 inch. This is a beast of a knife, and a lot of people I think don't realize it, but it's not too heavy. Did really nice milling with it, and yeah, super lucky to have tracked down prototype number 1, and that one I actually traded for a knife that I got from a friend on the channel, which was one of the very early variants of the mini FSD-I. It just worked out really well, where he was looking for the mini FSD-I, which are pretty hard to get. He got that, I got this, and everyone won. That's prototype number 3 for the full-size FSD. I also have variant number 3, production model number 3. They're almost the same. The one thing I noticed, and I don't know if this was actually done after market or not, is that this thing's shiny here. It could have been done in order to anodize, or maybe that's just how it was on this early variant. I don't know. But prototype number 1 has a, you know, polished pivot collar, if you want to call it that, and this one has like a dark washed pivot collar. So that's really the only difference. The rest of these are pretty much identical as far as I've been able to see. He really just nailed this from the beginning, which is pretty cool here. So yeah, that's number 3 FSD. I also have number 54 FSD, which was still on the old button here. The button changed over time. This one's just, I think, like anodized number 67. This one I would say is for sale. I haven't actually listed it, but if you're interested in it, feel free to let me know. It's one that's available. I might even sell number 3 too and just keep prototype number 3. So hit me up if any of these 3 here are interested. This is pattern number, that's pattern number 2. And then this is pattern number 3, also open to selling. This is number 189. It's a really cool one, but honestly, it just sits in the safe. This is brand new in box. I got it from another collector that hadn't used it and actually built it off of the semi-custom drop when he got it. It's a really cool one, but not something that I personally carry, but just one that I thought was one of the coolest that I saw in this pattern number 3. Aside from, you know, a regular, as you can see, I'm a pretty big fan of a regular textured tie without the anodized finish on it. But aside from that, this is like the coolest one that I've seen in this pattern. I just think it looks so cool. Now this is one that I actually carry, and it was the first one that I actually won from Craig Brown on one of his drops. And this is mini FSD number 3. Oh, you know what? I'm doing this out of order. Let me swap this because I'm going in chronological order, and I mixed those up. There we go. Welcome to mini FSD prototype number 1. Also got very lucky. A guy listed this to go after a grail knife on Reddit one night. I can't remember if I found it or if one of my friends found it, but saw it, talked to him, bought it, and was just so thrilled. I did pay a bit over table on it, which I'm not a big fan of doing, but man, so cool. Because I think this is the model that, this model got him very popular. You know, he got very popular with the FSD, but I feel like this mini FSD was like the model that made him one of the best knife makers in the world. Like this is just, as an all-around EDC knife, one of the coolest knives that's ever been made. And I do feel like, you know, this one's very special. So prototype number 1 of the mini FSD. And what's cool about the prototype number 1 on the mini FSD is there are no changes. Like he figured a lot out on the full-size FSD. I mentioned the button's different. You can actually see that here, that the button got hollowed out. There's some jimping changes that happened from like this early prototype here. Maybe you can't really see it there, but they're a little different, and then a little different back here also. So there's like little changes along the way on the FSD, but I feel like he kind of nailed it by the end. And then you saw that pretty much come straight out in the mini FSD in prototype number 1. There's really no change that I've seen from any of the mini FSDs. He did do some custom versions and so on, but like this one's number 319 and it feels the same as prototype number 1. Like I really feel no difference there, which is awesome. So this is the one I carry, coming back to where we were. And I think it's just a super cool pattern. It's a really cool finish. Like you can't really tell in the lighting right now, but maybe you can. You see it's a little bright in the milling areas because it's sort of dark washed or stone washed, and then he's milled it out of the stone wash, and then that part remains polished. So it really has just a spectacular finish on it versus this early one here. Actually, the whole thing's kind of got that more, it might also be stone washed, but it's sort of bright washed. This is kind of dark washed, if you will. And I kind of like this for my daily carry. It's a little less blingy and a little more subtle, and like has a little more tactile feel to it. But honestly, obviously this finish is also just kind of, it is still loud, so it is what it is. But that's why I have a few different finishes here. So that brings me to mini FSD-I prototype. This is his latest model, prototype number 1. And I won this one on the drop. So you can see P1, that's prototype 1, and CPM 154. When he brought out the mini FSD-I, I actually checked out fast enough on this to get it, and was honestly shocked. I didn't expect to get one. It's very hard to check out fast enough to win a knife on a Craig Brown drop. There's a lot of demand, but was thrilled to get prototype number 1. Prototype number 1's quirky for a few reasons, and I'll compare it here to, let's do this one because it's the most recent one. You can see the nub on there is a little different, like it's a little lower. These nubs are a little higher, so he increased the nub size. He has done it without the slot since, but this one doesn't have the slot. Yeah, just a few differences. I can't remember if there's anything else. Maybe something on like the milling or the interior milling or something like that changed, but I can't recall if there's anything else. So generally this is the production model, but in pattern number 1, which it looked like he wasn't going to do at first, but I have seen he is starting to do. This one does have a slightly different feel than the other two. It's a little more like clunkier, while the other two cling a little bit. But it's just a super cool model, and yeah, a total one-off that sort of represents this first version, prototype number 1 of the mini FSD-I. My friend won this mini FSD-I prototype number 2 on the same drop, which was cool. You can hear that one has a little more of a clink on it. You'll see also that the way that it drops is a little different than the last one that I show you here, but just a beauty. And this is pattern number 4. He's doing pattern number 4 and 5, has like another cross here, and it's even more granular on the pattern. But was very lucky that a friend of mine won this and then decided he didn't want it and sold it to me for table price, which is what I always appreciate. So this one actually says, instead of P1, it says Proto number 002. So it's a little different there. Obviously a different milling pattern, different on that nub, like I pointed out. This one's a little taller. When he did this flipper nub, that's about it. So I honestly, he gave me this and I was like, it feels kind of bad having prototype number 1 and number 2, but this is actually one that I was lightly carrying. I haven't cut with it yet, but I was carrying it, and just, I freaking love this knife, and the way it sounds when it deploys is phenomenal. And then I got very lucky at Maker's Syndicate. I missed the mini FSD-I lottos. 3 other people got them. Congrats to all those folks. One of them sold one to one of my other friends, which is pretty cool. So he has one. But I was talking to Craig and I was like, hey, are you ever going to do a Damascus version again? I'd really love to have a mini FSD-I in Damascus. And he's like, yeah, you know what? Send me, I actually had one extra I couldn't finish for the event. Send me an email and let's talk about a build. And I initially was just going to do this with a regular textured tie because he had only done inlays with Damascus for the for the Damasteel models, and they were $2,250, and it seemed a little expensive. So I was going to see if you could just do the Damasteel with the regular textured tie to kind of look like that, and then just sell this guy off. But he came up with this idea. He had this Damascus billet, and I'll zoom in on this if you haven't seen the video yet. This Damascus billet from 2019 from a guy that made these called Zlatanox, with a Z, Zlatanox, and he hadn't used it and he was thinking about what to do with it. So he had two knives, this one and another one in Magna Cut, that he was just going, he said, what if I do this one? And he showed it to me, and I was like, oh yeah, let's do that, because it's fancy but it's subtle, which I really like. So this kind of met my aesthetic appeal, and I don't know if it's because of the polished blade on this, or maybe that it's set to a slightly lighter detent, or what it is, but the action on this may be the best knife that I've ever handled. So ended up being just extremely pleased with getting this, because it's just a phenomenal knife. I will not front flip this one over the other knives just out of pure fear, because it's such a beauty. But look how drop shut that is. It is just insane. So that one is a very special one in the collection. Got to work with Craig to put it together. Very unlikely that this ended up in my hands, but it worked out, and it is really spectacular. So that is 18 different knives that represent Craig Brown. I should have mentioned at the beginning of the video, but a big part of why I'm a big Brown Knives fan is because he's up 20 minutes from me in Blaine, Washington here, so it's kind of buying local. So there's a little bit of attachment, I think, to the location of the brand and stuff, and it makes it a little special when I go out with friends and stuff. I'm like, hey, this is made up in Blaine, and it's just kind of cool to talk about, something that's made local here. Aside from that, I'm super pleased with where the collection is. If I could change anything here, if I could find Brown Parabolic #1, if I could find #1 or prototypes of any of these three, that would be super interesting. So if you know of them, or if you have one and you're interested in either trading plus cash or minus cash, and or just like this model more and want to trade, or want cash for yours and then I'll just sell one of these or maybe keep it, I'd be very curious in a Parabolic, a Servo, or an Exponent of various versions. Those are the ones that I have the least of, obviously, and the ones that I could imagine having slightly different versions of, although I do love these. So that's about it for now. Please let me know if you have any questions about Brown Knives. I'll do my best to try and answer some of those. I'm usually posting content on Instagram, so follow me at PocketPriorities there. And please like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.